Hey guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my August reading wrap up. I think August is the best reading month that I've had so far this year. I have 12 books to talk about today. So I've actually started doing something new on my channel where I've been splitting up my wrap-ups kind of. So I'm still going to talk about all 12 of the books here, but I'm not going to get super far in depth with some of them because I've already put up a separate romance wrap-up and a separate sci-fi and fantasy wrap-up. So I'll leave both of those videos linked down below and I'll let you know as I go which books I talked about in those videos if you want more thoughts on those particular books. So in this video, I'll go in depth on the books that weren't in those videos and do like a brief overview of all of them, if that makes sense. And as always, I'll have all of the books that I talk about today linked down below if you want to go learn more about them. So yeah, let's look at the stats that we have for this month. Like I said, I read 12. I think I read some of my favorite books of the year this month, and I also read one of my most hated books of the year so far. So we had one 1-star, we had one DNF, we had one 2-star, 2 3-stars, 3 4-stars, and 4 5-stars. So 5 stars more than anything else. I'm happy with that for sure. So as always, we'll do this in chronological order based on when I read them in the month, and let's just get started. So the first book that I finished this month was Autobiography by Christina Lauren, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This is a YA contemporary romance between two boys in a small town that's predominantly Mormon, and one of them is bisexual and one of them is a Mormon. And this is one of the books that I talked about in the romance wrap-up, so I will kindly send you over there if you want to get my in-depth thoughts on this book. But like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. This is the second book that I've read by this co-author writing team, and I found that I really enjoyed their book so far. I thought this one was really heartfelt and sweet and touching, and given the kind of sensitive subject matter, I think it was handled really well. So moving right along, the second book that I finished this month was Brightly Burning by Alexa Dunn. This is a YA sci-fi retelling of Jane Eyre, and I gave this a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I know people find the decimal points annoying, but I actually have like very specific reasoning behind the way that I rate. Like this one wasn't a 4-star, but it wasn't a 3-star. And it wasn't a 3.5 star. This is a 3.75 star for me. It makes sense in my head. Basically just know it's closer to a 4-star than a 3-star. This is one of the books that I talked about in my science fiction and fantasy wrap-up, so again, I will kindly direct you over to that video. I promise I'm not going to do that for every book in this list. That's just what's happened so far. But yeah, overall, I think this is well done for what it is. It just ended up not being my cup of tea, and my major complaint was just that it kind of felt like two disjointed stories. The first half focuses on this romance, and the second half is this fast-paced, like action-packed sci-fi. So it just felt like two separate stories to me. But overall, I enjoyed it, would recommend this one. The third book that I read this month was Nevernight by J. Kristoff. This was also in the sci-fi and fantasy video. The next book isn't. The next book we'll actually like talk about. But Nevernight, J. Kristoff, this is a new adult fantasy. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this one of my favorite books that I read this month. And this is about Mia, whose whole family was murdered, so she goes to the Red Church, which is sort of this assassin school to learn how to be an assassin so she can avenge her family. And she has this power to like manipulate shadows, so she can like wrap herself in shadows, she can travel through shadows. She has this shadow cat that's her friend that follows her around. Slow moving and confusing to begin with, but overall definitely worth it. Push through. Loved this book. Okay, now we get to the first book that we actually get to talk about. The fourth book that I read this month was Sometimes I Lie. This is an adult psychological thriller kind of deal, and I gave this a 3.75 out of 5 stars. So I went into this book pretty much blind, and I would recommend doing that. The blurb is basically telling you that the woman is in a coma, she doesn't think her husband loves her anymore, and that sometimes she lies. That's all I knew going into the book, and I think you're better off that way. Except I will say, I had a really interesting reading experience with this book. I almost DNF'd it at like 60%. So I did not like the writing style, and I found all of the characters incredibly unlikable. And the only thing that pushed me through this was because I had heard from people the plot twists really got them, and they were blown away, and it was so good. And so I was like, all right, I gotta keep reading. I gotta figure out what these plot twists are. Like, I need to get there. And so that's what kept me reading. If I hadn't heard other people's reviews beforehand and I hadn't known that there were good plot twists coming, I would have DNF'd this book. So I agree with what everyone told me. The plot twists are good. They did get me. It was worth it. It did redeem the book for me. And I hated the first half of the book. I found it so boring. I didn't like the writing style. I didn't like the characters. But once you figure out like the reveals and everything, it makes complete sense why it's written like that. and I don't think she could have done it differently. So the rating for this book was kind of difficult for me. I ended up giving it, like I said, a 3.75 stars because I didn't like the whole first half of the book. I liked the second half of the book, and the second half of the book made the first half make sense, but that doesn't make up for the fact that I like slogged through the first half of the book to the point of me wanting to set it down. So I don't know. I'm conflicted about this one. If you like thrillers, I would recommend giving this one a try. It's not the best thing I've ever read, but I will say I really liked the plot twist. Did not expect that at all. It redeemed the book for me. Personally, I listened to this one on audiobook, and I don't know if I would recommend it because, like I said, I didn't really like the narrator, but overall I would recommend this book. And obviously, because it is a thriller and there's like plot twists and stuff, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil you. So the next two books that I read after that I'm gonna lump together because they're in the same series. I read Dead Until Dark and Living Dead in Dallas by Charlene Harris. These are the first two books in the Sookie Stackhouse series, or the True Blood series. These are also in my romance wrap up, and like I said in that video, I've started rewatching the show since I started reading the books, and I'm enjoying myself so much, you guys. It's been so long since I've watched the show, and I finally got past the point in the show that I'd stopped watching it the first time around. I'm in season 5, and so the show doesn't follow the books exactly, but I think they build on each other really well. So if you're gonna read these books, I would actually really recommend watching the show together, because I think it, like, they improve on each other. Basically, they fill in the gaps that the other one has. If you don't know what these are about, they're an adult paranormal romance where vampires are out and mainstreaming, and the Japanese have basically produced this synthetic blood called true blood, so they no longer have to feed on humans. And our main character is a telepath. She can read people's minds, but she can't read the minds of vampires. These are not YA. There's a lot of graphic sex in here, just so you know, especially in the show. I gave the first book a 4 out of 5 stars, and then I gave the second book a 2 out of 5 stars, maybe like a 2.5 or something like that. That was expected for me because I remember not liking the second season of the show. Not because it's necessarily bad, I just hated all of the storylines. I didn't care, I was bored. If anything, I was just annoyed because vampire blood in this series is basically like a drug. And so if you take like 1 drop of it, you're like essentially like tripping on acid. You're like seeing things and like doing weird stuff, and so half of the show is these weird montages of these people on drugs and like hallucinating, and I just found that storyline so annoying. I don't know why. I just like had no patience for it. It's like, I really do not care. This is so freaking weird. I do not care. And the second book, I just really didn't care about it. So I'm thinking I'm gonna move on and try the third book in this series, but the second book, honestly, I suffered through because I just hated all of the storylines. But the first book I enjoyed. It's trashy. The writing is really bad. There's an adverb literally every other word, to the point where it's just amusing because it's such like a fundamental part of the writing style that I almost just like forgive it. Like, it would be horrible writing in any other book, but in this book it works. I don't know. If you're just looking for like a trashy paranormal romance, I would recommend these. The next book I have to talk about, we'll actually go in depth on this one also, was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is another thriller, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. This one's really popular right now, and most people I've heard really liked it. I've heard some people who were kind of indifferent for it. Personally, I really enjoyed this. It's very fast-paced. If you're looking for a book that you can just read in one sitting, 100% give this one a try. We're following this young girl. I think she's in her mid-20s, and she has had this horrible life. This poor girl. She's an orphan, she lost her job, she's homeless, she's recently single because her boyfriend was cheating on her. Basically, she just has the worst luck. And then she answers this ad that she finds in the newspaper to be an apartment sitter in this really famous historic apartment building in Manhattan, and basically they're just gonna pay her like thousands of dollars to stay in this apartment, but they have some kind of weird rules that she has to follow. She's not allowed to have any visitors, she can't spend any nights away from the apartment, she's not supposed to talk to anyone else in the building, and things like that. And we learn that this apartment building has a really weird history. A lot of bad things that have happened in this building. Like I said, this was really fast paced. I was very intrigued. I was actually, I don't know, you're either gonna love or you're gonna hate the way that it ends. You're either gonna be totally like satisfied and like, oh my god, that was so good, to the plot twist, or you're gonna be like, are you freaking kidding me? Personally, I find it really disturbing just based on the things that I find disturbing. Like, oh, it was so upsetting to me, but like in a good way. Like, I liked it. It definitely did not go the way I thought it was going to, which in part was disappointing, but also, you know, it's great that it wasn't totally predictable. It's not the most like mind-blowing plot twist I've ever read. It's not the best thriller I've ever read, but if you're looking for something that's really fast-paced and really easy to read, especially if you haven't read a lot of thrillers, because then this isn't gonna seem cliche to you, I would totally recommend this one. Since reading this one, I've put holds on his other 2 thrillers because I really want to read some more of his books. I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, I read it in like 24 hours, would totally recommend. Okay, so book number 8 for this month was the... Oh wait, I actually have the physical book for this one. If you couldn't tell, I used my library a lot this month, so I don't own most of these books. So the next book was The Program by Suzanne Young. Last month or the month before, I read her new book, Girls with Sharp Sticks, and I loved it, so I wanted to check out her... I would say this is probably her most popular series. And this is a YA dystopian novel, essentially, where suicide and depression have become an epidemic. And the United States has created the program where basically they take teenagers who they think are at risk or who have already attempted suicide, and they like wipe all of their memories so that they won't be depressed anymore, and then send them out as like shells of human beings, but they're cured. And our main character, Sloane, has basically faced so much tragedy in her life. She's known several people who have committed suicide. Her friends are like dropping like flies, and so she's considered like a high at-risk candidate. And I ended up giving the program 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked this book. I don't know if you've stayed caught up on the discourse with this book. There's a lot of controversy around this, and there's a lot of people who really didn't like this book. And so I was reading through other people's reviews before I made this video just to kind of see what people had been offended by and what people had found wrong with it. And I 100% see where people are coming from, but I don't agree. And this is coming from someone who has experience with depression, so I'm not like trying to invalidate anyone else who's just had a different experience than me and then was offended by this book. Like, obviously, however you react to this book is totally valid. But personally, from what I can gather, people were offended by this book because they didn't like the idea of suicide and depression being something you can catch, which is basically how this system works. Is if you have people who have committed suicide around you, you're at risk because the program thinks you're gonna like catch that depression, which obviously is not how mental illness works. That's not how depression works. But I don't think that's what the book was saying. And I don't think the book was trying to perpetuate that idea. The whole point is that the program is flawed and they clearly don't understand how mental illness works, and that's why it's not successful. And so I think it's critiquing that idea more so than like saying this is actually a thing. Like, the program is very clearly painted as a bad thing. It's a misguided attempt to help these kids, and it's clearly not doing it well. So personally, I didn't have a problem with it. I really liked the book. It was really fast paced. This was a book that I literally finished in like 1 hour. 1 hour in a day. I found that I just really like her writing style. It's not like it's a particularly beautiful or impressive writing style. It's just very fast and very easy to read. I haven't continued on with this series. I heard the series kind of drags, so I don't really know if it's worth continuing. If you've read it, let me know. I was pretty satisfied with this as a standalone book, and I don't want it to be one of those things where I continue on with the series and then because the books go downhill, my opinion as the series goes downhill. But yeah, overall, I would recommend this. Just obviously, you know that there's like trigger warnings for depression, suicide. There's a lot of suicide in this book, so just be careful if you know that's gonna hurt you. So after the program, I read Crashing the A-List by Summer Heacock. This was in my romance wrap-up video. This was my DNF for the month. This book made me really angry. I really didn't like this book to the point where I was so angry I had to stop reading it because I knew it was just gonna keep making me angry. I like ranted about it in that other video, so we won't do that again here. But basically, this book follows Clara. She's a recently unemployed book editor who's living on her younger brother's couch, and she's clearing out storage units for the summer to make some money until she can find a new job. And in one of the storage units, she finds some incriminating evidence against a movie star. And when she tries to contact him to warn him that she's found these things about him, he gets the wrong idea, thinks she's trying to blackmail him, and long story short, they end up in a fake dating scenario and they absolutely hate each other. And I found this book like sickening. That's how angry it made me. We're not gonna get into it here. We're gonna move on. So after Crashing the A-List, I read Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this one. This was also in my sci-fi and fantasy wrap-up, and honestly, this is one of the best books that I've read so far this year. It's not one of the books that I've enjoyed the most, but just from like a craft perspective, this is one of the most well-crafted books that I've read so far this year. This is basically a fairy tale retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. We're following our main character, Miriam, who is the daughter of a moneylender, and her father absolutely sucks at his job and just lets everyone take advantage of him, and he never tries to get his money back. So she ends up taking over his job, and just through being like a really smart businesswoman, she ends up making like a ton of money and turning silver into gold. And this ends up catching the attention of the king of the Starks, who's like fae or fairy, because they love gold, and he thinks she actually has this magical ability to turn silver into gold, when in reality she was just making smart business decisions. 5 out of 5 stars. Loved this. If you like fantasy, especially high fantasy, would definitely recommend this one. After that, I read A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemner. This is a YA fantasy retelling of Beauty and the Beast. This is also in my sci-fi wrap-up, obviously, but I also gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I was pleasantly surprised by this one. Like, I expected to like it, but I didn't expect to love it. And the first half I liked, didn't love, but the second half really won me over, and I ended up enjoying this and finishing this a lot quicker than I was expecting to. So would totally recommend this one if you like retellings. Our main character also has cerebral palsy, and I really just loved her attitude on life and the way that she thought about herself and the way that she never let her condition get in the way of her living her life. And Angela, who's also a booktuber, I've heard from her that the representation was great, and this is like one of her favorite books now, which is what convinced me to pick it up. So would totally recommend this one. And then our last book that we have to talk about in this video was my 1-star read. Oh man. This book was so bad. As you can imagine, this is a romance novel, and I have been kind of on a romance kick lately. I've never been a huge romance reader in the past, so I've kind of been experimenting and working my way through the different subgenres within romance to see what I like, and I have definitively figured out that I don't like this kind of book. Honestly, giving it 1 star was generous. With that said though, this is clearly a very specific type of romance, and if you like these kind of books, you'll probably really like this. But I have figured out that just in general, I do not like this type of book, and so I'm gonna be swearing off romance for a little while after reading this because it was so bad. So this book follows India, and her younger sister has gotten herself into some big trouble while trying to steal money at a poker game, and now the guys who she tried to steal from are threatening to sell her into sex slavery unless her sister hands them $10 million. And so India starts playing poker to try and win the money, and she ends up getting herself into big trouble with this billionaire guy and making a deal with him. And this book was really short. I listened to the audiobook. It was maybe like 6 hours, so I guess it's more of like the short form, straight smut, but everything about this book. For one thing, I hate every character in this book. It's one of those things where you have characters who say one thing and then do another repeatedly, had no common sense, always acted against what they said they would believe in. Their actions made literally no sense. This book has every cliche in the book. There's nothing original about this book. It's not even a book. Like, it's not even like a full narrative arc. It's basically one really cheesy episode of a soap opera with a plot twist or cliffhanger at the end that comes out of nowhere that was not set up for whatsoever. It didn't make any sense. The main love interest, as you can imagine, is super possessive and a douchebag, and the way that he thinks about our main character, because we're switching off back and forth between their two perspectives, is disgusting. The way that he thinks about her, and that's supposed to be like hot or something? Are you kidding me? And then our main character, it's literally a life or death situation for both her and her sister, and this guy is treating her like subhuman. Like, he treats her like less than trash, and she's on this like ticking time clock. It's a life or death situation, and all she's thinking about is how much she wants to sleep with him. And then she's like, I shouldn't feel this way, but then she continues to think about that, and I was just like, really? Would you really be thinking these things in this kind of situation? Are you serious? She's also like afraid of him. Oh, so freaking stupid. And it was so cheesy. The dialogue, so cheesy. The things that she said, she literally calls his dick the Kraken to his face. Oh my god. And I was really disappointed because the first chapter is written from the guy's point of view, and the way that he described the main girl at first made me kind of intrigued by her, and the writing was pretty solid. And then the second chapter, when we go to her point of view, it ruined it. I was like, oh, as soon as I started to hear from her point of view, I hated her. She had no self-respect, no sense of self-preservation, no common sense. Also, highly do not recommend listening to the audiobook because the narration was the most annoying thing I have ever heard. At the end of every sentence, she would like drag it out to the point where it made like everything sound cheesy and weird. She'd be like, and I know I shouldn't want him, but I do. He walks down the street. Like, every word like that for no reason. Oh my god, I hated this book. And I can't even say that it was like not a real book, but it was smut, because there's not even like that much smut in here. There's like one sex scene, and it's not a good sex scene either. It's not well written at all. There's literally nothing going for this book. Nothing. I hated it so much. And it's the first book in a series. Are you kidding me? I'm like, I can't breathe. So yeah, that's probably Honestly, the worst book that I've read so far this year. 10 out of 10. Do not waste your time unless you're just kind of like morbidly curious. Then if you just go into it wanting a laugh, let me know how it goes. But other than that, the other books that I talked about in this video, would totally recommend those because I enjoyed almost everything else that I read this month. So yeah, I think that's gonna be it for this video. Like I said, I'll have the romance and the sci-fi and fantasy wrap-ups linked down below if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts on any of those books. I'll also have links to all of the books down below if you want to go check them out or get a copy. If someone goes and reads Deal with the Devil, please come talk to me about it. Tell me what you think of it. I need to know. I still can't believe that was a thing. That was a thing that I read. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up. Maybe subscribe to my channel if you're new here. I would love to have you stick around. I put up at least 2 new videos every single week, usually on Wednesdays and Saturdays. That's my new schedule. I also have a second channel if you want to go see some lifestyle stuff, and all my social media's linked down below if you want to come follow me elsewhere. But other than that, I'm really tired of talking, so I'll just see you guys in my next video very, very soon. Bye.
So hit me. So hit me. So hit me. First a confession. With you, I feel a connection. With